David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, welcome back, I guess, to myself. I'm back from Los Angeles. I was on the Joe Rogan Experience, one of the world's biggest podcasts and YouTube shows, thanks to Ben Dixon, who filled in for me on sort of short notice. I mean, the Joe Rogan thing came together pretty quickly. I didn't even know that I was going to be going to Los Angeles this week until the day, I believe it was, that I was leaving on the end of May break, which had been planned a long time in advance. So thanks to everybody who understands that this was a big opportunity and I didn't intend to immediately leave the show again so quickly after that brief break at the end of May. I also, I guess, should thank all the trolls for those nice messages leading up to the interview. David, you're going to bomb. I can't wait to see Joe Rogan wipe the floor with you. You're going to embarrass yourself and all of that stuff. And the funny thing sort of is that when someone sends a message like that, I actually wonder if that person has never seen Rogan's show or maybe has never seen my show, because Rogan has long form conversations with people and owning or whatever is not really his thing. I mean, sometimes people do end up getting exposed on his show, as we've pointed out, like when Candace Owens or Dave Rubin go on there, or Ben Shapiro goes on and says things that don't make any sense. But in any case, I think it went really well overall. I'm very self-critical, and in watching it back after the fact, I don't think I handled every aspect of the 2+ hour conversation as well as I would have wanted, or maybe would have if I had known in advance exactly what the topics would be. But that's the whole thing. It's sort of an unplanned, informal, long-form conversation, and I know that I'm a huge self-critic. Many areas for improvement. Would have liked to have been more clear in some areas, but it was really a great opportunity for the show. It's already had a nice impact on the show, nice boost on YouTube, nice boost on podcast subscribers, modest paid membership boost, although the thing about that is it takes a while to convert a new viewer to a member, since you don't immediately become a paid member of a show as soon as you hear about it. Most people don't anyway. You hear about a show, then you watch it or listen to it for a while, and then some portion of those people later become paid members. So my hope is that in the next 4 to 12 weeks, we'll convert a lot of that new audience into paid subscribers, and that'll be a really great thing. Also had a great dinner with Destiny and Hassan Piker and my manager, all of whom are out in Los Angeles. There are some pictures on my Instagram from that. I was on another show while in LA called Exploring Minds with Michelle Carroll, who's an actress who also now has an interview show. And I had about an hour conversation with her. It hasn't been published yet. I think it will be pretty soon. And I posted a picture from that, behind the scenes picture of Michelle and of me on the Instagram account. So check it out. Overall, huge win in the battle of ideas. There were moments on the Rogan show where Joe and I disagreed, and I think those were some of the best moments, and it was fine, and it was not awkward, and it was as respectful as I imagined that it would be. We talked about what constitutes a homophobic slur in the context of YouTube's terms of service and terms of conditions, how to figure out whether a company is liberal or conservative. And we had disagreements, and it was absolutely great to have them, and I hope that it was productive in a sense for the audience. So hi to everyone who has learned about this show over the last 3 days. Sorry, I guess, to everybody who was waiting for my appearance on Joe Rogan to go so poorly, to be such an embarrassment, such a shameful faceplant that it would decimate the David Pakman Show. I apologize if that's what you were expecting. Onward and upward to more things and expansion and more announcements coming soon. I did, unfortunately, have to mute hundreds of people on Twitter after these appearances because of the amount of just vitriolic trolling. But my new approach is I don't even think about engaging with the nonsense on Twitter or social media. I see it, I mute it, I don't have to think about it again. And I strongly advise other people in the audience to do the same thing. Unfortunately, some of the people in the audience are the ones doing the trolling, and so they probably won't take that advice. But if you're a good faith actor on social media, I'm telling you, I am doing much better in terms of everything: productivity, focus, concentrating on the right things over the noise, since I have just started this policy of no engagement with trolls, mute them, don't think about them again. That's my advice to you. Okay, Bayer, the massive pharmaceutical manufacturer, has bailed out on two major Fox News opinion shows. That's me pretending that there's actually a significant difference between Fox Opinion and Fox News reporting moments and programs and hosts. Bayer has pulled advertising from Tucker Carlson's show and from Laura Ingram's show. Now, both of these shows, you might know, have already had serious advertising issues because the shows are toxic. And Bayer has been a major advertiser. Bayer was Tucker's fifth largest advertiser and Laura Ingram's second largest advertiser. And the reason for the cancellation is being reported as white nationalist rhetoric on Tucker Carlson's show, and Laura Ingram defending a white supremacist named Paul Nealon on her program. And interestingly, Bayer has actually a little while ago started reducing and pulling ads off of these shows. Now it's being formally reported based on contacts with Bayer. So what I want to do here is cut through all of the BS for you, because even within our audience, the idea of an advertiser boycott is controversial. Sometimes when we talk about advertiser boycotts, people will make so-called free speech arguments against ad boycotts, even though you can't argue against the reality that calling for a boycott is a form of speech. A company deciding where to advertise using whatever system they want to use to figure out where to advertise is a form of speech. So there's this weird thing about criticizing ad boycotts and demands for ad boycotts on the basis of free speech, because it is a form of speech in and of itself to say to a company, please don't advertise on this show. There are sometimes sort of weird business regulation arguments that people will make against ad boycotts, although I don't even understand those in this context. So I don't even know how to refute them. They just don't make any sense to me. Here's the bottom line, as I tweeted yesterday. If you don't like the fact that advertiser boycotts can negatively impact shows that you watch, shows that you listen to, shows that you like, if you don't want advertiser cancellations to be a threat to programs that you think are good programs, stop making media reliant on ad dollars. What I mean by this is, if we didn't have a system where shows depended on advertising money, then the ad boycott would lose its place as a threat to the existence of programming. This is why I've been trying to grow our direct membership for years. I know that we joke about how much I talk about membership or whatever. Every dollar that we get from membership is a dollar of what I would call immunity from advertisers, from YouTube demonetization, which we'll talk about later because that's happening again, Facebook demonetization. This couldn't be more obvious. One way or another, you are paying for the show, okay? You either watch an ad and pay with your attention, and then the advertiser is the one that actually makes the financial transfer of dollars directly, or you pay the producer directly through a membership, through a pledge drive on NPR or PBS, through a cable subscription for some channels. If we had more direct financial support when YouTube's adpocalypse hit in 2017, it wouldn't have mattered if our level of financial support was decimated from YouTube, because we would have that direct support. In the same way, we have advertisers. Someone could, if they wanted, go to our advertisers and say, I won't support you if you continue to advertise with David Pakman. Now, I'm guessing most advertisers would say, David Pakman hasn't said anything discriminatory or racist or xenophobic. We don't know why we would pull our ads from David Pakman. But that would be a threat that disappears if our level of direct financial support goes up. The legal side of this is super clear. Like, I'm not making a partisan argument. Advertising choices are a form of speech, period. Lobbying companies not to advertise or to advertise on whatever show is a form of speech. It's protected 100%. It's 100% fine. We can debate whether an ad boycott is a good strategy. I think it's great when activism has an impact. right? In the real world, it's harder and harder for an individual's voice to matter. We know that the demands or the desires of rich people are way more likely to become law or policy than the demands of poor people and middle class people. The demands or the ideas or the desires of big corporations are way more likely to be taken seriously by our elected officials than those of just your individual Joe or Sally or whoever. So in a world where it's harder and harder for an individual to have their voice heard, I think it's great when activism has an impact, and it has had an impact through ad boycotts. But I agree that there is a real problem when media outlets are so over a barrel by advertisers. And the way to fix that is support the shows that you like. If you want them to cover what they want to cover, not be threatened by the loss of ad dollars. If they have a membership program, sign up. Fox is different. Number one, they don't actually even really need to make money because rich right-wingers fund them. They also don't have membership. But when it comes to YouTube or other platforms, I mean, we know what the solution is. Under 1% of our audience are members. I estimate, as I said on the Joe Rogan show, 80 to 85 or even 90% of our audience can afford $2 a month. If we grow our support from under 1% of our audience to 3%, any advertiser that wants to boycott us can boycott us. YouTube can demonetize us. It would not matter. And what's most exposed to me by the controversy of these ad boycotts is not really the debate over the ad boycotts themselves. My view on that has been clear for a very long time. It's that we have a problem that advertisers have so much power, and we know how to fix it. Direct support of shows. Let me know what you think. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, welcome back to the show. Let me thank a couple of really great people. David Becker and Kristen Connolly are today's two new David Pakman Show members of the day. Whether it's Adpocalypse 3.0, demonetization, whatever, membership makes us immune to the threat from those risks. David Becker, Kristen Connolly, thank you so much. Also want to say a big thank you to Shayla Jones, who is today's longtime sustaining member of the day. Shayla's been a member since 2014, almost 5 years of membership. Incredible how far the show has come in that amount of time. Join them at www.joinpakman.com. All right, a very, very big week for the David Pakman Show, the Joe Rogan Appearance, a lot of other stuff. So let's go to the phones and see what's on people's minds at 617-830-4750. Let's start with our caller from the 205 area code. Who's calling today from 205?
Hey, David. This is Corey. Welcome back from California.
Thanks, Corey. What's going on?
So when I watched your interview, I think it was for the second time with Andrew Yang, and you guys were talking about college, and he pushed back about the trades and emphasizing the trades more and not being for, in particular, fully subsidizing, let's say, university-based education. One of the things that came to mind that I was wanting to ask you for a while is why not instead push for fully funding trades, maybe as a starting point, and then to expand, let's say, towards subsidized or fully subsidized university education.
Well, what would be the reason to start with trades? I mean, you could start anywhere, or you could do both, or you could do neither. But what would be the reason to do trades first? How would that help us eventually get to fully subsidizing state college?
Well, I think the thought would be, at least in my mind, David, would be that if you are tackling what would be more in demand right now, so taking Andrew's concern, let's say, that trades are heavily underrepresented in the United States versus many of the other European countries in particular, focusing on trades first as a way to, not just get a better representation, but also start to mitigate some of the incoming problems around automation and how that might affect job opportunities in the United States?
Listen, I don't know that the automation question is going to be better handled by more trade school versus more bachelor's degrees. I think that really the fundamental question around automation is going to be what portion of the gains from automation go to the business owners versus the employees. And the way to think about it would be, imagine a company with 100 employees. Automation makes it so that you only need 50 employees plus some machines to get the same level of productivity. There's basically like three possibilities for how those gains are used. In sort of like a purely vulture capitalist system, you would just lay off the 50 employees, you would keep only 50, and the company gets all of the gains of that technology. In a socialist system, you would keep all 100 employees, and the doubling of productivity from the technology would allow every single employee to just work half as much. In like a social democracy setting, we would say, okay, some portion of the gains from that technology can go to the business owner, and then some portion should be distributed among the employees. And where you set that line, like is it 5% or 95% for the employees, depends sort of on your political philosophy. That's a reality regardless. I mean, that's going to happen in both jobs rather that you need a bachelor's degree for, and jobs that you would go to trade school for. And I think it's just a broader economic question. I don't know that we solve it more or less by saying we're going to focus on funding trade over bachelor's degrees.
Okay, thanks for the response. Appreciate
All right,
the call, David.
Great to hear from you, Corey. Appreciate it very much. Let's see, who is joining us today from the 203 area code? Caller from 203, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Shiv. I'm calling from Boston.
Hey, Shiv, what's going on?
Well, I saw your appearance on Joe Rogan, and I was actually curious if you're familiar with Chomsky's propaganda model.
Yes, I am.
So I guess you pointed out to Joe, I guess, that these companies that kind of have a public image of kind of being liberal institutions. So I guess I wanted you to kind of generally comment on how right now, I guess, this right-wing kind of, I guess these Dave Rubin types, Tim Pool types are kind of criticizing Twitter or YouTube for being leftist organizations when in actuality, I suppose that's the image that they're trying to put out. So in a lot of ways, these are actually hard right-wing capitalist organizations that are trying to make people think that they're liberal to kind of get away with pushing that right-wing agenda. And I guess I kind of want to get your thoughts on that since you brought that up with Joe Rogan.
Yeah, that's really good. And I'm glad to have a chance to talk about this more because, so for people who don't know what Shiv is talking about, very briefly, on the Joe Rogan program, Joe said, YouTube clearly is left-wing. And I said, in what way? And he said, well, it's like they're based in Silicon Valley and like everybody there is liberal. And I think he said maybe like their CEO is liberal or something like that. And I made the case. I wasn't saying there is no way in which you could qualify YouTube as left-leaning. And I'll say more about that in a second. But what I pointed out is YouTube is a huge corporation. Their primary interest and their motivations in most of the decisions they make are financial. And they benefit financially from pushing sort of right-wing, supply-side, low-tax, anti-regulation stuff, and that's not super left-wing. Now, I do think the one thing I didn't say, Shiv, and I think is a fair criticism, is that there's a difference between saying YouTube structurally and economically is right-wing versus YouTube's internal culture is right-wing. You can have a situation where YouTube's internal work culture or Facebook's internal work culture is more progressive, hipstery, left-leaning, whatever, and yet still their outward-facing sort of structural economic priorities line up more with low-tax, anti-regulation right-wingers. And I didn't get a chance to say that on Rogan, and I think that is an important missing piece. So while I completely agree with you, like, yes, the corporatist priorities of these companies are sort of more in line with Republicans. Any company is looking to make money. Looking to make money is not necessarily left-wing or right-wing, and the culture can still be one that is a left-wing culture. We just have to parse through it and have more of a detailed, nuanced conversation.
Yeah, and it's a good point. I think what kind of irks me about, I guess, this critique of social media coming from, I guess, these so-called free speech advocates is that they're kind of conflating the idea of social liberal ideology with having gay pride with economic ideologies. So I'm glad
The
to
other
see
thing
more
that's
light on the
missing from
topic.
that, which I think is interesting, is increasingly just recognizing diversity or having anti-bullying and harassment on the lines of homophobic slurs or whatever. Increasingly, that's just called being a good, normal person who exists in society. I think it's unfair now to, like, what are you saying about the right when you say if there is an anti-homophobia policy, that's a left-wing company? Like, are you saying that the right is pro-homophobia? At a certain point, we just have to recognize this is just behaving like good people.
Yeah, no, definitely. People are definitely straw manning each other in that sense.
All right, Shiv, thank you very much. Appreciate the phone call.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. We're taking calls at 617-830-4750. Why don't we go next to our caller from the 314 area code? Who's calling today from 314?
Hi, David. My name's Josh. I'm from St. Louis.
Hey, Josh, what's going on?
Hey, I'm a longtime listener, first-time caller. And I actually became more politically aware just like a few years ago at the 2016 election. And I was very more conservative on a lot of stuff because my family was conservative. But once I actually started reading and learning more, I kind of crossed that line. And I started to become more liberal and then just more progressive.
Interesting.
And so, yeah. And so, anyway.
Well, Josh, before you go on, I mean, I'm curious, was there any particular issue where you realized, wow, what the right is selling on this issue is just totally wrong, and it was like a big catalyst for getting you to revise your political beliefs?
Well, one of the things was I'd never really realized the hypocrisy. I just kind of I was raised by my grandparents, and they're pretty conservative, and I just kind of took what they said, at face value. And I'm like, okay, these are morals. And then my household was also very religious growing up. And so I just okay, I took this. And it was really I guess I realized the hypocrisy at the pro-life, pro-choice thing. Because my grandfather he's anti-big government. And then I heard an argument from years ago, I think on the Young Turks. It was, hey, having the government come in and tell you, hey, you want to control what a woman does, that's big government. I'm like, okay, that is. And I took it to my grandpa, and then he was kind of hypocritical on it, and I realized, okay, and I started noticing all the trends of hypocrisies.
Interesting.
Like they're not principled in their ideology.
Got it. Interesting.
Yeah, so my question to you is, you kind of dedicate, your career is, political commentary. You're in it all the time. And so, I find myself getting very fatigued. It's hard just kind of talking to people constantly about it. And then it's just my issue is that, I'm around so many people that are more right wing, and then so much of my energy just gets drained. Someone like you, how do you find the energy to just keep doing it, pushing on and on, just being so deep into it?
Well, listen, I mean, number one, I would suggest finding some left-wing people to be around. I don't know, St. Louis is a big enough city that there are probably drinking liberally or some local Democrats group or something. I would definitely try to spend time around people where you don't even, it's not to talk politics, it's not to talk left-wing politics necessarily, but it's just to know that you're around people who are like you in terms of ideology, because it is fatiguing to constantly be around people that fundamentally have a worldview and even in some cases a moral code that seems so antithetical to what you believe. So in my personal life, there's very few conservative people around me. That's the reality, and I think that that's a really good thing. And I basically don't talk about politics outside of the show. So my strategy is on the weekends, as much as possible, I stay off social media and don't do any tweeting or thinking about politics to the extent that I can. In my sort of day-to-day life, I'm mostly around people who more or less share my ideology. and I don't talk about politics with them. I'm just around people who share my values and ideology. And those are the two things that I would suggest you try to do. And I think in St. Louis, it's more than possible.
Right. All right. Yeah. Thanks, man.
All right. Great to hear from you. Appreciate the phone call. Let's take a quick break, but don't hang up if you're holding, because I will get back to the phones, which are jam-packed. Quick break, back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
We are taking your calls at 617-830-4750, sort of a different Friday show today. No audience questions, no classic interview, doing more news stories than we normally do because I was away for a couple of days in LA doing a few different appearances, including with Joe Rogan. Let's go to, you know what? Alex is on the phone. Alex, who interrupts, is on the phone. That's how we have him labeled. And we haven't heard from Alex since January. So what's going on, Alex?
Hey, David.
Hey.
My question is in regards to Citizens United. I know you touch on it a few times, but
sure.
So there's no limit to how much you can make, how much money you can make on political speech. I mean,
sure.
The Washington Post did a Super Bowl ad that was $5 million. So there's no limit there.
Hold on a second. So wait, let me
with...
see if I understand. There's no limit. I'm trying to understand. There's no limit to how much you can make on political speech because the Washington Post spent $5 million on an ad. I don't know that I understand what you mean.
Well, that obviously means they make millions of dollars.
Yeah, it's a big
so
corporation and they make a lot of money. Yeah, okay, I agree with that. They make the Washington Post makes money.
So what's wrong with spending as much as you want on political speech?
I have no idea how the two things are even related.
Well, in regard to Citizens United, I mean, you know what Citizens United is, right?
Yes.
You know the background of it?
I mean, inform me if you think there's an element of it I don't understand.
Well, they want to limit how much people can spend before an election.
Who wants to limit?
The people who are against Citizens United, the people that took Citizens United to court.
Right. There are people who want to level the playing field when it comes to political spending in order to make our system more like those of other countries. Yes, that's true. There's people who think that money in politics is not a good force. Go on.
Okay. Well, why?
Because it has a corrupting influence. We already have a system where the rich and corporations have an outsized amount of influence, not because they necessarily have better ideas, but because they are able to peddle that influence and use lobbyists and political donations and PACs to get politicians to pay. Hold on, I'm in the middle of explain. Do you want to hear my explanation or not, Alex?
I'm listening.
Okay. We already have a system where even though everybody gets, quote, one vote, the desires and the policies that would benefit the vast majority of people are not taken as seriously by our elected officials as are the desires of large corporations and rich people because of their ability to use money in politics to get what they want to be the priorities of our elected officials. And people who want to even the playing field want to even the playing field of influence as well.
Okay. Well, voters, they want to know who's going to be good for the country. So,
yeah,
all this is information. If you want somebody to win, you have to show that they're going to be good for the country.
Who has to show?
Why can't you send that information to as many people as you want?
It would be great if everybody could send all of that information to as many people as they want. The problem is rich people and big corporations have the money to send whatever messages they want, regardless of whether they are accurate or not. And poor people, middle-income people, small business owners who might have the exact same desire to reach just as many people can't do it merely because they don't have enough money.
Right. That's speech. It costs money to speak. You try and reach as many people as you can.
Yeah.
You do that yourself,
Right. So what's your point? So let me see if I understand. Alex, you just think unlimited political spending is fine, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay. All right, good. So
It's
we disagree.
information.
We just disagree about that. All right. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate the phone call.
I'm not afraid of information, David. I'm not afraid of people.
Okay. He's not afraid of information. Got it. All right. Just so people know, there's a delay on the hang up. So I actually did want to hear the rest of what he was saying there, but you can't unring the bell once I hit the hang up button. Okay. Let's go next to our caller from the 630 area code. Who's calling today from 630?
Hi, David. My name is Clark. I'm from in Algonquin, Illinois.
Hey, Clark.
It's great to be on the show. I just got to say, God bless you for what you do. And I'm going to come right out the door with connecting with what I just said there. What do you think about the statement claim proposal from that of someone who is vehemently in support of Andrew Yang, would love a Yang VP. Yang president, Warren or Bernie VP.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love a Yang VP. Bernie, Warren, Yang, any of them. I'll take any of them. Just, don't get us stuck with there's a few of them. I'm not going to name any in particular. But anyways, what do you think about the suggestion for people like, for example, Jesse Lee Peterson all the way to Donald Trump? So that of people that are left-leaning and not necessarily believing in the ideology that's claimed to be the foundation of the Republican Party, which is family values, and I would say the sentiments and values of Christ Jesus, which seems absolutely the most hypocritical thing in the world to anyone that actually spends any time learning about the teachings and values of Christ. What would you say to the suggestion of why not utilize the Bible and other, really just interpretation of it, but even just scripture at face value. Like when I was listening to I recently started listening to you, and when I heard the Jesse Lee Peterson interview, I was like, this guy has to be either completely just the master of trolls, or he truly is just absolutely brainwashed. And I really tend to think it's the latter for the majority of the people. But what do you think about that suggestion? Because that's generally what I go to when I get at it with people that really try to use the Bible as rhetoric or as
Clark, okay, hold on. I'm sorry, I got to interrupt you because I don't know what you're talking about. You're saying, what do I think about using the Bible to justify political positions?
Yes.
I'm against it. I believe in separation of church and state, and I think no matter whether you can... Hold on a sec. I believe that no matter whether you can make an argument for or against a policy on the basis of the Bible, I don't think that should have any part in our sort of national discourse. Now, at the individual level, I have no problem within, for example, an evangelical Christian community. I have no problem if within that community, people want to start saying, hey, you know what? If we really want to vote the values of our congregation, we should be voting for this left-wing candidate over this right-wing candidate. That's great. From the point of view of the national discourse, I don't think that the Bible should be a factor in how we make law or policy. And for me personally, it's not relevant. But for progressive Christians, absolutely go and advocate for the Bible actually suggesting progressive ideas rather than conservative. I think that that's great.
Well, for someone as I would just say as well informed as yourself that encounters people that use this, regardless of if you believe in it, it's very frequently utilized as a counter argument.
It is. Well, the Bible is very often, the Bible has stimulated huge amounts of Republican support on the basis particularly of the issue of abortion, for a while on the issue of gay marriage, et cetera. So I think fighting fire with fire is great. It's just not for me as an individual, and I don't think it should be part of the national debate on what laws we should or shouldn't have.
Okay, and then can I just ask one more question that's a completely different realm? Thank you very much.
I've
for
got
answering that.
42 people holding, so that I think call back for the next question. I really appreciate your call. I do want to get to somebody else before we run out of time.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Let's go to our caller from the 805 area code. 805. 805, are you there?
Hi.
Hey, who's this?
I think that might be me.
It is.
Awesome. Hi. Appreciate your show. You're pretty cool. I had a question about this whole adpocalypse thing that
Sure.
people are talking about. It seems like everyone wants to treat these platforms as if they're actually the public square when they're not beholden to anybody but shareholders and advertisers.
That's correct. Currently, they're not.
Right. And so I kind of don't get how, I guess everyone wants it to be that and expects it to be this neutral platform, but can anyone really pretend that they are?
Here's the thing. Here's my take, and not everybody's take is the same on this. For me, it is unquestionable that right now, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whoever, can have terms and conditions that restrict the types of speech that is either allowed or monetizable. Like, there's no debate whatsoever that as the law currently stands, they can do that. What there's a debate about is, should the law around the regulation of these companies be changed to consider them public accommodations, in which case they would not be able to have terms and conditions that restrict speech beyond just what is illegal, what is calling for illegal activity or whatever. That's the debate. You're completely right that as it stands right now, like the entire adpocalypse thing is because YouTube doesn't want to lose money, and they're going to make decisions that aren't actually based on like the political leanings of individuals who are reviewing content. It's just based on what is going to prevent brands from freaking out and pulling out ad money. If you want to change that, you need to designate these platforms public accommodations and regulate them as such.
Because that makes a lot of sense, but it seems like introducing regulations that would allow for any kind of speech as it is, just speaking out in the world, that what would happen is brands are going to be freaked out anyway. Even if it's illegal, they don't want to be associated with, potentially hateful speech, for example. So it seems like that could be the end almost of that public square, just by virtue of it's the problem of the business model being so dependent on ads that can be attacked for any particular, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum someone's getting attacked from.
Yes.
Just the ads don't want to be around it.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And in fact, my commentary on today's program says that, which is that I am on the left, but I don't need to take a partisan approach to realize that this is just about what's going to freak brands out or not, period. And we ideally should sever this relationship between the media producer and needing the advertiser to be comfortable with their content. And the way to do that is direct support. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. I got to run. I'm going to let you go. I wish we had more time to devote to that, but I am going to talk about that more on the program. That does it for calls today. Sorry to everybody I didn't get to, but there will be plenty of opportunities next week to take more phone calls and hear from more people.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Okay, so I spoke earlier this week on the Joe Rogan program for close to an hour about the drama with YouTube and right-winger Steven Crowder, who I learned on the Rogan program is apparently a comedian. I didn't know that because I hadn't ever seen him do anything funny, but I guess some of the stuff is supposed to be funny. So I don't want to redo that entire story because it seems that every 6 hours it's changing in some way. But the short version of it, just to kind of set the stage for this conversation, is that Steven Crowder said a whole bunch of homophobic stuff about a Vox journalist named Carlos Maza, who's openly gay, including that Maza is a lispy Mexican queer. Crowder did it while wearing a shirt that says socialism is for figs. Figs, right? So, I mean, what's wrong with socialism is for a type of sweet fruit. Nothing could possibly be wrong with that. Now, initially, YouTube said, no problem. What Crowder did does not violate our terms and conditions. Then there was blowback, and YouTube said, actually, it does violate our terms and conditions. We're going to demonetize Steven Crowder's entire account. Then they said, well, even though that's what we're doing, he can get the monetization back. And I'm going from memory here. If he removes a link to the Socialism is for Figs t-shirt and makes a couple of other relatively modest changes. So here's how the debate sort of topics have broken down about this. Roughly 45% of the debate is, did Steven Crowder violate YouTube's terms and conditions or not? Looking at the terms and conditions that prohibit targeting and harassment of individuals, particularly on the basis of membership in groups like LGBT or whatever else. That's been like 45% of the debate. Another 45% of the debate has been, should YouTube terms and conditions even be allowed to limit what is monetizable or what is allowed, right? So this is a broader free speech question and a question about regulation. Should these platforms be forced to be considered, should the law be changed so that they are considered public accommodations and thus aren't allowed to limit speech beyond what is illegal in any way? 9%, roughly, I mean, I think we understand these are not exact numbers. 9% of the conversation has been, does being a comedian excuse you from having to follow those terms and conditions, or does it allow us to differently interpret how your content should be evaluated? And I have argued for a while, and this sort of came up on the Joe Rogan program a little bit, that you can't, in the same way that the right says the left can't use identity politics as a cudgel to suppress discussion, the right should not be allowed to use "this is a comedian" to excuse or to get out from under just normal criticisms of whether what someone is doing is accurate or not, whether it is discriminatory or not, whether it is harassment or bullying or not. That's been like 9% of the conversation. Almost completely missing from this conversation, I brought it up on Rogan, is that this is all about money and that this YouTube situation is very likely to trigger the next adpocalypse. Did Steven Crowder actually violate YouTube's terms and conditions with targeted homophobic harassment of Carlos Maza? The answer to me is obviously yes, but I don't actually believe it's the most important topic here, since any platform's terms and conditions are going to be subjective to a degree and open to interpretation. So it's not going to resolve any principle of how content should be regulated and monetized to focus too much on Crowder's obvious violation of the terms and conditions. Should YouTube be allowed to limit what is monetizable via terms and conditions that are stricter than anything that's not illegal is monetizable? This is also simple. Right now, legally, YouTube is 110% absolutely allowed to monetize or not monetize whatever they want. They're 110% allowed to prohibit content from their platform as they wish, as long as it doesn't violate non-discrimination along protected classes. YouTube would not be allowed to say, we don't allow Muslim people to publish videos to YouTube. They would not be allowed to say white men are not allowed to publish videos to YouTube. But right now, they can obviously say homophobic content is not allowed, or it's not monetizable, or whatever. Now, some people want that changed, and that's okay. The law needs to change to regulate platforms like YouTube as public accommodations if that's what you want. It's a reasonable debate. Should it be changed? We can discuss it, but that's not the way the law is right now. Is being a comedian an excuse as far as the YouTube policies? It's not an excuse. The really important thing that is not being discussed, Kyle Kulinski talked about it, I talked about it privately with some other hosts, but it is barely being discussed, is that this entire thing is likely to trigger the next adpocalypse. Adpocalypse 1.0 was April of 2017. We lost, for a period of like 3 weeks, 99.8% of our YouTube revenue. The channel was some days making under $1 because brands pulled out of YouTube or threatened to pull out of YouTube because racist videos had ads appear in front of them. That was Adpocalypse 1.0. Adpocalypse 2.0 was less acute. It was less sort of well-defined. It was another period of time with a very high level of what I call soft demonetization, where lots of individual videos are put in a limited monetization state. The videos are allowed. They just barely run any ads and they don't make any money. I said on the Joe Rogan program that this is fundamentally about money. This entire Crowder thing, in terms of how YouTube is handling it, is about money, and it's about how will YouTube's advertisers react to what is going on. This Carlos Maza, Steven Crowder situation, however it's resolved on the individual case level, is going to make some advertisers panic. Ads for Coke appearing on racist videos made advertisers panic. This much attention, including articles in The Verge and Real Clear Politics and everywhere about brand safety and homophobic content on YouTube, this can only have one effect on YouTube advertisers, and it's to get them to say, this is too hot for us, let's move our ad dollars elsewhere. This is not going to attract advertisers to YouTube. YouTube going back and forth about whether homophobic targeting is or isn't monetizable is going to freak advertisers out. And who's going to suffer the most from this? It's going to be independent shows like ours. It's going to be shows like ours that are big enough that we do rely on YouTube revenue, but not so big that we can just flip a switch and get that revenue elsewhere when it disappears. This is why, as I said earlier in the discussion about the ad boycott that has successfully led to Bayer bailing on the Laura Ingraham show on Fox News and Tucker Carlson on Fox News, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, this is a nonpartisan analysis beyond the fact that there's a lot of right-wingers defending the homophobic content of Steven Crowder. But putting that aside, my argument is let's disconnect funding from an algorithm controlled by a huge corporation subject to the mood of advertisers who advertise on the platform or threaten to stop advertising or actually stop advertising on the platform. Let's sever that financial relationship by directly funding the programs that you like and that you want to see have full freedom to cover whatever they want and not to have to even think about decisions related to, is this video going to be demonetized? Is my entire channel going to be demonetized because of some Coke ad appearing on a racist video, or because Steven Crowder is wearing a Socialism for Figs shirt while saying that Carlos Maza is a lispy gay queer or lispy queer Mexican or whatever he said? Let's disconnect it. The solution is simple. Let's fund the programs directly. This is why I've been talking about it. It's not just for fun that I talk about membership. It actually can make us immune from these adpocalypses, one of which seems to be building right now. Hypocrisy no longer knows any bounds in the American right wing. If I say to you, lock her up, what do you think of? If you were paying attention during the 2016 election, when I say lock her up, your mind should immediately go to all of those calls to lock up Hillary. During the Republican National Convention, everyone from Donald Trump's now indicted National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who was there egging on crowds at Trump's rallies or the RNC, wherever, to lock her up, to crowds chanting it at Trump's rallies while Trump looks around smiling and pleased, to Trump's tweets, to Trump's debate statement that if he were in charge of the justice system, that Hillary would be in jail. They've been calling for Hillary to be locked up despite not having been charged with any crime, despite the obvious reality that Hillary Clinton is not going to be charged with any crime. And recently, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi said, rather than impeach Trump, she'd like to see him in prison. Now, we can argue about whether Nancy Pelosi's position on impeachment makes sense. We can have a debate about all of that. But there is no question that this is not a unique thing on one side of the aisle. On the one hand, Nancy Pelosi says she'd like to see Trump in prison for the list of crimes that Robert Mueller said there is substantial evidence for. And on the other hand, lock her up has been, a stalwart fixture of the American right for 3 years at this point. But Fox News propagandist Sean Hannity is outraged at Nancy Pelosi, saying that calls to lock up political opponents are, quote, despicable. Does hypocrisy no longer matter? Do double standards no longer make any difference? And the answer is they don't to the right. We've been pointing that out for a long time. Check out what Sean Hannity had to say.
Despite these obvious flaws, this bias, this deception, Mueller's report, the irrefutable fact that there was no collusion, of course, the rage Trump Democratic Party, they're just hell-bent on one thing only, and that's impeaching the president. They don't have a reason. They don't state a reason. But, of course, they get the assistance of the psychotic media mob's conspiracy theorist liars. And tonight, this is no longer a Democratic Party like of Scoop Jackson, even Joe Lieberman. Instead, it is now the party of anti-Trump rage and psychosis. And for some reason, even impeaching Trump apparently is not enough. We had Speaker Pelosi now apparently telling senior Democrats she'd like to see Trump behind bars. Based on no actual crime, she wants a political opponent locked up in prison. That happens in banana republics, beyond despicable behavior. And by the way, they would literally turn, in many ways, the USA into a country we would no longer recognize.
Wait, hold on a second. You're saying that telling political opponents not charged of any crime that you want them locked up, or you plan to lock them up, or you would lock them up if you were in charge? You're saying, Sean, that that's unbecoming of the United States, and it's like what happens in so-called banana republics? I got it. Well, remember when Donald Trump said this to Hillary Clinton during a debate in 2016?
You know, it's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
Jeff Sessions previously chanted, lock her up. There's a very long list. But the problem is Nancy Pelosi wanting to see Trump in jail for crimes that the Mueller report says there is substantial evidence of. Irony is dead. Satire no longer exists or never existed on the right. Intellectual consistency is completely irrelevant. I've talked about how Donald Trump has weaponized ignorance in this country. He's also weaponized hypocrisy. For all of my focus on Trump, I keep trying to remind you that Trump is a symptom, not the disease. This is a really good example. The disease is the anti-intellectualism that has spread throughout the country and American conservatism and has allowed someone like Trump to come in. Trump appealing to the basest instincts of the American right wouldn't be possible if they were not appealable to, I guess is what I'm trying to say, on that basis. Weaponizing their ignorance about everything from trade to immigration, as Donald Trump successfully did during his presidential campaign, that is not something that Trump created. Trump took advantage of it. And in the same way, there is this immunity to their own hypocrisy that Donald Trump is able to weaponize, that the American right is able to weaponize, that propaganda outlets like Fox News certainly know how to weaponize. And this problem precedes Donald Trump. This problem is going to continue after Donald Trump. There is no doubt whatsoever. And this is just one example of that. It's an embarrassing one, but on the Fox News echo chamber, it does really well, and it really fires up the base. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. I got a very interesting and nice voicemail from Jordan Peterson with some advice for my earlier in the week appearance on the Joe Rogan program. Take a listen to this warning from Jordan Peterson.
Oh, hi, David. This is Jordan B. Peterson calling in. I just wanted to call because I heard the exciting news that you might be on the Joe Rogan podcast later this week. So congratulations on that. And just wanted to call and also say to make sure you study up before you go on there, because I did it myself and I didn't have all my ideas entirely coherent in my head. Yeah. And I realized afterward when I watched the video that I just said a whole lot of gobbledygook. And Joe Rogan, who seems just like a stoner comedian type, actually made a lot more sense than I did. Okay, so that's my advice. And again, congratulations. Okay, I'm going to say goodbye now. Okay, bye-bye. Bye.
Okay, so very good. Jordan Peterson, of course, is Canadian, not Irish, and that started sounding a little bit Irish in some places. We've got a great bonus show for you today. I'll tell some behind-the-scenes stories from my trip to LA. We'll talk about the Boston Straight Pride Parade. Lovely city. And we will also talk about whether a school officer should be jailed for child neglect. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. It's a great time to support the shows that you enjoy, that you think are important, as we have a growing adpocalypse 3.0, ad boycotts, and so many other things. www.joinpacman.com. It is very easy to become a member. It takes under 1 minute, and you can save 40% if you want by using the coupon code This Is 2020. That'll save you 40% off of the membership of your choice.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.